I will read through the notes and things, advice to the public, etc. Usual format. All visitors must sign into the visitor book at the entrance to Kiln Craigs. This includes council staff from other buildings. There is no planned fire evacuation drill or alarm test today, so if the fire alarm is activated during your visit, you must exit the building immediately. Council officers will direct you to the nearest fire exit and will escort visitors to the building fire assembly point beside the Silverman at the top of Parliament Walk. Kiln Craigs staff should report to their floor's assembly point. You should remain at your assembly point until directed to reoccupy the building and only re-enter once the fire marshal has advised to seek to do so. Please do not attempt to leave the site by vehicle until cleared to do so by the fire marshal to ensure that access routes are kept clear for emergency vehicles. Please note that this is a public meeting and the members of the public may be in attendance. The meeting will be also recorded by the clerk and published online for public viewing at the meeting. Otherwise, the taking of photographs, including screenshots, audio or video recordings, are not permitted during the meeting unless with the express permission of the chair. Can members attending virtually activate their cameras where possible to enable you to join by video? And can all attendees mute their microphones when not speaking? Please do not come in during items unless I invite you to do so. If members attending virtually wish to speak on any point, please indicate by clicking on the raise your hand button. Members in the chamber should also raise their hand, and I will bring you in at an appropriate time. If members have not been able to access all the papers for the meeting, please indicate now. Thank you. I will now ask the clerk to confirm attendance at this planning committee and would ask that members indicate if they wish to declare an interest.
We have apologies from Councillor Fairley and Councillor Quinn.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, right. Just before we get started, there are a couple of new faces in the room. I'd like to introduce the member of the committee to them. First of all, we have Mary Black, who's the lead officer for the local development plan, and Mary would like to make herself known to the committee. Good morning, Mary. And we have Mark Dunlop, the new principal planning officer in the team dealing with planning applications and enforcement. Mark down at the bottom end there. And in the wings, we have Gemma, who's a work experience person joining us today, just to see how we behave ourselves. Welcome, Gemma. Right.
Sorry about that. Can I just double check? There's no declarations of interest.
Yeah, no declarations of interest. Yes, that's okay. Okay, folks, let's get on to item 2. Well, we've done that. That's declaration of interest. Item 3, confirming the minutes of the planning committee from the 15th of January, which you have a copy in your hands. I will just go through them in a usual fashion. Please indicate if there are any errors or omissions or additions that require to be deleted or inserted. I'll just read through it. See the page numbers now. Page 5, page 6, and page 7. And finally, page 8. Fine, I can take it that we are adopting these minutes. No objections to that. Fine, moving on. Item 4, this is a consultation regarding a consultation from Scottish ministers regarding an application made under section 36 of the Electricity Act. I won't go through the full thing as it will come out quite clearly in the presentation. This will be given to us now by...
My apologies.
I like the sound of my own voice, John, but once is enough.
Yeah. Okay. Let me off.
We have an IT moment.
We might have some more apologies.
I think the mute has worked.
Okay.
All right, over to you.
My apologies,
Sorry, John.
just some gremlins in the
The floor is yours.
Okay. But this is permissible. I can use this microphone. Thank you very much. I will start by introducing this application. At the last committee, you dealt with a wind farm, which was a consultation under Section 36 of the Electricity Act 1989 by Scottish ministers. Similarly, this application you're going to look at now is a consultation under the same regime, but on this occasion, it is for a battery energy storage system rather than a wind farm. So, once again, Clack Manager Council is a consultee and not the determining authority, so hence this is a non-speaking item and third-party representations must be submitted to the Energy Consents Unit, not the Council. Officers are proposing that there's no objection raised to this consultation for the reasons set out in the report. A suite of conditions has been recommended, which is attached as Appendix 1 to the report. The main components of this scheme, just to introduce you, are the area of battery containers in the northern part of what we'll call Site A, and the substation in the southern part of this area. And other elements of the scheme include water tanks, a maintenance and operations unit, various elements of container-based accommodation and storage, elements of fencing, hard standings, hard surfacing throughout the battery and substation areas, plus areas of landscape including mixed scrub and neutral grassland areas. I'll show all this in the slides. We've got site plans and layouts and so on. The sole access to this site is from the A977 in Fife to the east, and the site comprises two land areas, with all of the physical development proposed for Site A to the west, and Site B being set aside purely for environmental enhancement and biodiversity upgrading. And much of Site A, which is the principal part of the site we're looking at today, is identified as vacant or derelict land, according to the Council's 2015 land survey. And Site A is also included in the list of local development plan business estates sites. And it's proposed, just so you know, that this development is proposed on a temporary basis for 40 years. That'll be the operational lifespan. So, just to give you an idea more broadly, if you look at the screen there where this is, in between the 876 and the 8977, it's 600 metres or 0.6 of a kilometre from Kennet village and around 1.5 kilometres to Clackmannan. Okay, so it will start to make more sense here. The Site A is the primary area for development where you would see the battery energy storage systems and the substation going, and Site B over to the east there is not really being developed other than for environmental enhancement. And I think it's useful to see this slide with regard to the boundary of the county there with Fife, and hopefully you can see that quite clearly. Look at the areas that are within fully within Clackmannanshire. I think I might have skipped. Yeah, sorry, it jumped ahead. Just gone back a slide just to show you here that the position of the sole access coming there from Fife, not in Clackmannanshire. There's no direct access proposed for the A876. Okay, it's caught up with itself. This is the first really sort of informative plan we've got to look at. The main elements there, I'll try to talk you through them. So everything you can see, which is in the centre of the picture, which is green and orange and black, that's the main area where you would have the battery containers, which are basically like chip containers, but glorified and made so they can contain the batteries. The black bits in between are the inverters, so the part of the engineer of the site to make sure that the electricity circulates and is connected in the correct way. And the orange rectangles next to the green ones are the sort of reserve batteries, so they double up. And then you can see in the bottom left corner the sort of black cross area. That is the substation, which is where all the engineering is done to connect into the grid and control the electricity. And around the periphery of the site, you can see the green areas. You've got a SUDS area next to that transformer area, and then you've got most of those green areas are for neutral grassland planting. It's really a part of the landscaping proposed where they're not really doing any planting. It's just really setting those areas out so that they are sort of buffer areas. Other than there's some orange hatching, which you can probably see just to the right of the container area where it's proposed to plant some trees and some scrub. So that's the extent of the landscaping. You can see the two blue circles. They are water tanks, mainly connected with the sort of cooling in the event of any issues there. And all of the grey areas are hard standing, and that area is a platform. Essentially, they'll try and make it as flat as possible. Now, it's essential to note that with this sort of application, this sort of consultation, although the potential layout here is shown within the red line of the site, it's strongly indicative, but it does not commit the developer to undertaking the specific layout as seen in this drawing. However, we are strongly guided by what we can see. So the expectation will be that if this is consented, largely speaking, the footprint and the layout will be the same. But having said that, the condition 5, as set out in Appendix 1, requires the final scheme to be agreed. So all the components then we could look at a later date. And that is fairly common practice, again, with regard to this scale of application. Okay. Moving on, I think this is a useful slide. It identifies what's going on in the local area. I think the most relevant one is the one which is sort of dark pinky purple in the middle, which is the Kincardine North substation proposal. Now, most of that is within Fife, but the little bit on the left-hand side, which is the temporary access, you can just see there linking into the 876, is a live planning application with us at the moment, which I think Mr. Dunlop has been approved. Okay, while I was away, sorry. But largely, that substation area is within Fife, so it's relevant to what you're looking at today, but it is a separate scheme. So for our part, we've approved that temporary access, and it's then over to Fife to consider the large-scale substation development. Below that, you can see number 3 and number 4. These are some of the areas where you'll know as you're coming over the bridge, you're seeing large areas of infrastructure and pylons and substations, again, all in Fife, but relevant here because they are part of that overall sort of infrastructural and industrial setting. And I think also quite importantly, if you look at the light blue area at the top, that's Meadow End Farm next to Kent Village. And a couple of years ago, we were approached with an idea for another BESS system scheme in that area. It's been through sort of pre-act through the Energy Consents Unit, but for the past year, it's been quiet. Nothing's really happened on that. So what I would say is if that is pursued at some stage, it's going to have its own issues, but there will be cumulative with the scheme you're looking at today, because the distance there is, I think it's less than half a kilometre. It might be just a couple of 100 metres between the two. Okay. So just to explain this slide, you can see the circles there with letters H, F, V and C in. And what I've got next are some elevation drawings. It's not that easy to interpret because of the nature of the scheme, but I'll try and take you through these just so you can understand a little bit better what you'll be looking at. And I think essentially H, F and V on the left-hand side are the sort of journey along the A876, whereas C at the top, which I've just put in for a bit of additional information, is looking from private ground to the northeast of the site. So here you are, here's a typical elevation, and again, this is the first sort of look into the site as you're coming from the south into the county. I think the most important things to note there, if you can just about make out in amongst all the sort of annotation, is that the transformer units and the upstands and the gantries, they tend to be 12.2 metres at their highest. And then beneath that, you've got the sort of control rooms and the blue water tank, And also you can see there that you've got a sort of raised platform. Now, I'll say at this stage that the levels across the site at the moment are, they vary. It's not a flat site. It rises slightly from the southwest to the northeast, but also in there you've got quite a large area of spoil, which was put in historically with regard to the industrial processes nearby. That would come down, but generally speaking, the land would come up to create as flat as possible as you can get in that area. So there will be a bit of land raising. However, it would be somewhere in the region of 2 to 3 meters, not a large scale, not taking up to the highest ground. So moving further up the A876 and looking sort of east into the site, you start to see the substation. And so this would be, when you look at the site for the A876, and I've got some photography images you can have a look at as well, you would tend to see this first as you're coming up from the south. And then beyond that, you would see the best container unit area. So rows of containers. And this is then moving further north along the A876, and again looking east towards the site, and then you would begin to see this array of containers, and they are generally sort of between 2 and 3 meters high, and that water tank is on the right hand side is about 3.2. So it's that area of the site is quite low. The highest area is the substation area you would see first, but of course a substation, and I think it's important to note this when we're looking at further in the presentation, it's not a block. It is see through, if you like. And some of the visualizations you'll see, they imply that there is a sort of block area you'd be looking at, but of course it's not that in reality. But I'll explain that when we come to those slides as well. And this is the last one. This would be looking southwest from that private ground I showed you. But just to get an idea of the complete picture of what the thing's going to look like if it's consented. Okay. Moving on, we do have not a great deal, but some information with regard to landscape and visual impact assessment. And if you can just pick out in the middle of this, perhaps I could zoom that in. Would that be acceptable? Was somebody able to zoom that in for me temporarily? If not, then I was thinking more the Gillian and co. Ah, fantastic! You are a master. So 1, 2, and 3 are in Fife. And whilst they have some relevance with regard to the overall visual impact of the scheme, I'm not including them today because really the ones that we're sort of most interested in are the ones which are going to affect Clackmannanshire. Bearing in mind this is one of the main routes into the county. So 5 and 4 I will be showing you. 6, unfortunately, there isn't a decent graphic with the application to show you the potential impact. So I tried finding that, but there isn't one. But I've also included 2 in the presentation. It is within Fife, but just to confirm, or just so you can see what that area looks like to the, this is site B, where you'll see that the vegetation behind that site blocks off site A completely. So from the A977 in Fife, you're not seeing the development anyway. It's all screened by woodland. Okay, would you mind zooming that out again, please? Thank you.
Button.
Just back to full. Marvellous. Can you do it all the way, please? It should bounce back a little bit. Perfect. Thank you. So this is viewpoint 4, and it is on an unclassified. It's a road, but it's more of a lane and not heavily used. But it's just to give an idea, really, of the how this scheme relates to the infrastructure, which is already in the locality. You can see clearly there the overhead lines and pylons and so on. And also you can see the backcloth of the landform behind and the trees. And what I was saying earlier about this being the views of the substation being permeable. In this representation, the red area looks like it's a block, but it's not. That would be the upstands and the gantry. So it is very much more a permeable element of the development. And the sort of lower area, the blue represents the level at which the best container units would be. So, but really, this is very much a secondary viewpoint, not frequented heavily by traffic. And And so although it's helpful, it's not as fully relevant as, for example, this one. So one of the key considerations for us is the visual impact with regard to receptors being people, using that main route into Clackmannanshire. And this is about as near as you can get to it safely, which is why they've chosen it as one of the viewpoints. And you can see there that notwithstanding any vegetation that might be present, the area where the transformer would go, it comes into view quite quickly as you're coming up the A876. However, you can't also fail to notice that you are in the lead there of the pylons and the overhead lines. So we're already looking at something of an industrial a landscape characterized by industry. So the red block there is that's not the best. That's the transformer area. So 12.2 meters high, but permeable. But again, you know, if you'll have seen any of the sort of transformer areas in an electrical substation or any other sort of relatable development, they have quite a significant visual impact just because of their industrial nature. So they don't disappear into the landscape. They are quite prominent. And I think, you know, that is one of the things to remember about this scheme as you're passing by. You will see this quite prominently. And this, as I mentioned, is from the A977 in Fife. And that blue area just indicates to you that you're not going to see it from that road. It's all contained behind vegetation, and that vegetation is not going to go away at any point in the near future. So I've borrowed some imagery. Thank you very much, Mr. Google. And this is just really to give you an idea of what I'm talking about in terms of looking or how the development would look in passing on the A876. So really here you're looking northeast into the site. And you can see just in the right-hand side of the picture, the area of spoil I'm talking about, that's where earth has been deposited before. And that will be clear to sort of arrange for the platform area to be created. And then moving a little bit further up and looking east in the site, again, just to give you an idea of how open and prominent it is from the A876. But those of you who are sharp enough can see just in the left-hand side of the picture there's the edge of a fence. And that's kind of a roadside fence, which you'll see probably more clearly here. So this is approaching from the north, going south out of the county. And before you get to the area where the site opens up, you've got quite a lot of intervening vegetation and this fence. So in reality, coming from the south to the north, you're looking at this site for about 45 seconds in passing in a vehicle. Coming from north to south, it's less so because of this intervening, or just because of the orientation of the site from the road, this intervening vegetation. It's probably about 30 seconds at worst. So that is the amount of time you're going to be subject to the visual impacts of this scheme, albeit that they are quite significant. And then I'm just going to talk you through the other components. This is the water tank. There's two of them identified in the drawings there. You can see the height, 2.29 meters to the eave, so between 2.5 and 3 meters to the upper, or I can call it the middle point of the water tanks. And then this is a bird's eye view of one of the transformer and inverter units. These connect the battery units. So for each pair of battery units, you'll have a transformer and inverter next to them. So there's the rows. When you look at these, and you'll be able to see, I've got a couple of graphics of best schemes which I've stolen from the internet. You can see generally what they look like, and that's how it looks on the side. Same sort of scale as the containers, and again these are sort of linear, and in between the containers you'll see rows of these as well. Control room container, nothing fancy about that. It's just in effect a shipping container, just adapted so that you can have control on site. And then probably the largest building on site, which is a 19-meter, I think, by 7-meter maintenance and operation building.
I think it says 8.9.
Thank you. And inevitably, a site like this, you have palisade fencing, which is the security fencing around the bits which are unsafe to enter. And then you have the mesh fence which goes around the outside of the site. So the whole thing isn't surrounded by palisade. These are the fences you would see as you're sort of looking around the edge of the site. These are up to 2.2 meters in height. And just in the right of this screen, you've got an example of a CCTV lamp pole. We have recommended a condition for further details regarding lighting because we don't really have enough to go on at the moment. And that was something I think that our environmental health colleagues have raised just in terms of another issue to consider. And there you go, typical battery container. 2.9 meters high, 6.1 meters long, and they are always on a little bit of platform. I think that's part of the cooling regime. And to give you an idea of what these can look like, that's quite a good example. You can see the inverter units, the silver ones, in between the rows of the battery containers. And another one. Good to be able to compare the options which are potentially there in terms of the colouring. And the final one. And this is just to give you an idea of what the transformers I was talking about look like. I'm sure you've seen them on the larger electrical substations, but just to complete the picture for you, this is the sort of ancillary equipment that goes with the BESS itself. So to summarise on that, before I go into well, let me think, should I do this first? Oh, I thought actually it might be useful to just read out to you the principles of BESS. Yeah, this is in the report, but I'll read it for the benefit of the room. A BESS is an electrochemical device that charges or collects energy from renewables like solar and wind from the grid or a power plant, and then releases that energy at a later time when it is needed. The batteries charge at off-peak times and then supply electricity to the local electricity distribution network at times of peak energy demand. BESS therefore have a key role to play in contributing towards achieving net zero targets and providing flexibility within the energy system. The batteries are contained within cabin structures similar in appearance to shipping containers. Okay. So we are recommending that there's no objection to this scheme. The proposals are submitted, bearing in mind at some stage we are going to see a finalised scheme if it's consented. I'd like to point out to you that in this case, the recommendation isn't finely balanced. This principle is well supported by national planning policy, and the site is generally suitable, having regard to, firstly, previous development in the locality, but also allocations and the fact that this is vacant and derelict land as set out, or much of site A is in the 2015 study. It's really important to us as officers that we get the chance to have a look at revised landscaping proposals, because presently we're not entirely convinced, and I think that becomes clear very early in the planning report, that the applicants have given that full due consideration. You'll have seen during the presentation, it's quite easy to see into the site, and there's certainly going to be quite significant visual impact. So what we're considering there is that we want to have a chance in the future to review revised landscaping proposals. You can't really fully screen developments like this, but you can go to a long way to softening them. I've seen examples of that elsewhere in Scotland, and it really makes a difference, even at implementation, to show that you can actually set up an area which will provide softening and screening. So that's really important to note, and that is in the conditions. And one thing to point out, which is no longer correct, and which is really important, paragraph 3.4 is no longer, of the planning report on page 10, is no longer correct. Now, this doesn't change the recommendation, but what it changes is the procedure which will happen if the committee decides to overturn the recommendation to not object. Now, an objection by the local authority would have been an automatic trigger for a public local inquiry if this had come before you before the 18th of February this year. The legislation is now changed, and instead of a PLI, if you overturn the recommendation today, the case will be appointed to a reporter who will carry out an examination unless the objection is withdrawn or cannot be resolved by conditions or modifications. So that is significant to note, and it is a very new thing for us as well. Unlike your wind farm previous committee, which was an objection, and that has caused an automatic trigger to a PLI. I think it's important to point out that this sort of visual impacts we've been talking about are probably the only real issue that officers needed time to carefully consider. And we did have quite a good deal of dialogue and negotiation with the applicants on that side of things. But otherwise, other topics such as road safety, heritage, flood risk, noise, and other environmental effects are not significant in the planning balance, and haven't really had a great influence on what we consider the most important things in the recommendation. Having said that, it is all in the report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on those issues. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, John, and some very helpful visual stuff there, which I think probably for everyone that it's the visual impact, similar to the conversation we had regarding the wind farm, that the visual impact that will be the biggest factor, but that will come out in the questioning, I think. So I'm going to open it up now to questions. Councillor Law, followed by Councillor Vasili.
I have a couple, although I think I know what the answer will be with some of them. I think just public interest obviously would be the fire risk, but I take it the Scottish Fire Service would be consulted separately in regards to any kind of concerns that they would have and how they would manage a situation on site.
Not with regard to this scheme, with regard to other schemes I've looked at. This has always been raised, and I'm not surprised that you've raised it today. There is a separate regime in place with regard to the fire regulations. The water towers you've got there are part of the sort of cooling and response options should there be an emergency. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that given the nature of the scheme, that there might be an emergency. But it isn't under the planning regime to start with, and they will need to make sure that they've got their fire and evacuation and safety consents in place, but that's not through planning.
I thought you'd say it's not through planning, but I think it's an important question to ask.
Yes.
In regards to the water towers, is it a significant amount of water that will be needed? I'm just thinking, again, is Scottish Water consulted in regards to the amount of water that would be required for the cooling of the site? And then also, again, it would go, I don't know if they use water to put these fires out. I'm saying to cool stuff down. Are they consulted as well?
Again, I'm going to have to say this is really outside or out with our considerations. Bearing in mind that the Scottish ministers are the determining authority through the Energy Consents Unit, these sort of technical things, technical issues have to be picked up through separate consenting regimes and also through separate processes which are orchestrated by the Energy Consents Unit. So for us, that doesn't really come into play.
Grand. And then just when you were saying about the lighting, will we have to do like a bat survey as well, I take it, just in case, you know, the lights that go up are white, should be up red if there's obviously the bats as well.
I think it's a good point to raise, but it is one of the topic areas. Oh, sorry. It's a good point to raise, but it is one of the topic areas where we, as a service, don't have the capacity to sort of look into the ecology and the ornithology side of things. But consultees for government include Nature Scott and so on. For us, I think lighting is probably more significant with regard to how it will impact in terms of, are we going to have bright lighting which is visible during hours of darkness and security lighting? That to my mind is more within our remit. I don't think we can really sort of stretch towards the bats and birds sort of things, given the limitations within our service.
And then just in regards to the containers and the colours, like I would prefer a green colour than the white one. You showed that, so kind of how do we kind of direct our thoughts or our preference in regards to
that? Anybody else feel free on that's able to step in if you want to. My thoughts are that if it is the preference for committee to request that there is a specific colour for the containers that they prefer. We need to convey that to the ECU in the event of the recommendation being agreed, and that's writing back to them. But having said that, condition 5 does allow us to look at the specifics of the site. But if that is the committee's preference, then we can make that well known to the Energy Consent Unit and ministers. It is an option.
I don't know if anybody else is thinking with that, but are you able to put the pictures back up just so you can see?
Can I put the pictures back up? I'm not sure that, yes, I can. Good. So yeah, these are sort of representative. These are representative schemes, and this is a scheme that has been developed. I'm not sure where it is, but you can see from the landscape behind it's comparable to a Scottish landscape. So the possibility is there. I think what I will say is that the standard colours are white and very pale grey. And if there is a mind to suggest that the strong preference would be a colour such as this, it would be a non-standard production. We have had these conversations with the applicant. They are aware that we would potentially have a view on what a good colour would be for the units. So what I'm saying is that the dialogue we've had has covered this issue. And if you want to have a look at the alternative.
See the bottom pictures as well, that's like a darker green. My preference is that first one rather than that darker one. But I was also going to go with, I don't know, with the light coming down as well, like the white ones to me.
My apologies.
I was just going to say the white ones to me, and I'm just thinking just because it's by the road and I know it's only 45 seconds, but I was just thinking with the sunlight, I don't know how the sunlight would reflect off of it. I'm just going by the photo. To me, the white, when you see a container, it's quite dazzling. So that would be my preference as well, is that kind of, that green kind of duller one at the top, also because of that visual and the light.
I think at this point then it might be useful just to take a quick show of hands and an indication as to whether we feel as individual members of the committee that the colour of the units is significantly important. If you think it's significantly important and worth discussion, let's have a quick show of hands on that one. Yes, it's okay.
Chair, may I? Just to say that condition 5, as set out in the appendix, is a kind of coverall on the basis that the specifics are not proposed at this time. And again, that's the nature of the beast with this sort of application. The committee could consider including a further condition to specifically set out that it would like to be able to review the colour of some of the components. I would be content with that as long as the committee would be content with that. And Pauline, Lee, it's.
Well, I think from what we've just heard, we probably would want to.
I think that's a valid option.
What's the procedure in terms of the paper of getting that included?
I think.
You'd have to propose an amendment and you'd have to have someone to second that amendment to include that condition.
I think Fiona, you'll want to do this.
Can I propose an amendment for that to be?
I'm happy to second that.
Can we get what the amendment actually would be? Just
Do you want to just say it?
Well, what you said.
Oh, easy.
Can I just comment on that? I mean, what I've done elsewhere with this sort of thing is to request that the committee would enable officers under delegated powers to look at putting together an appropriate condition rather than it being a formal amendment. Would that be acceptable? It's an additional condition which would be recommended, but we would potentially be given delegated powers as officers to formulate that.
So just to clarify, so this wouldn't be an amendment, it would be a condition. But we would have to get consent of the committee to confirm that they're satisfied that it would be a condition instead of an amendment.
That sounds.
Oh, there is, working now. It's excellent. So this is the report and this is the conditions. You're looking to change the report. To change the report, you need to make an amendment. What I think you're proposing is under delegated authority to basically add a condition to this. Then that would have to be your amendment. My concern with that would be is that, and this is, I'm just throwing it out there, is elected members are making it clear what they're looking for. If it's delegated to the planning authority to make that decision, then the position in relation to what you're looking for as elected members in relation to the colour may not end up being because you've delegated authority to the actual planning officer to do that condition. But if we are comfortable with that, then sorry, Councillor Bilsily wants to speak.
Do you want to come in on this?
Well, I think, yeah, perhaps to the chief planner in consultation with the chair, but the strong preference, just specify that the strong preference of the committee is green. Is that what we're saying? And then you still have member involvement in it. I mean, in the end of the day, it might not be possible to achieve that colour. Am I right, John? But basically, you're saying you have a preference for a particular colour, and you want the ability to be able to convey that to the developer based on the visuals that you've had here today.
So where does that leave us?
Donald, do you want to add to this? Right, fire away.
Yes, I do, Chair. So in reality, what the committee is asking for is an appropriate camouflage scheme, which could involve a variety of colours, light grey, green. The reason why the developers went for white is probably a functional reason, is that absorbs less heat. Dark colours absorb heat. It has a kind of safety fire implication. I was going to cover some of these aspects, so just a very quick history lesson. So Lord Holford in the 1960s carried out, when all the pylons were getting introduced in the UK, there was a big UK commission that involved the military, and they said, how do we identify the impact of these pylons in the skyscape? And they came up with a light grey colour, and that was standardised throughout. That's why we have light grey pylons today. And as a consultee in this, because we are a consultee, I don't know if we can define particular conditions, but I know that we're asking for a camouflage scheme. And one of my questions is going to be, I have 6 aspects that I wonder whether there are standard conditions that the Scottish Government or whoever's assessing these applications are going to look at. So you're shaking the head. So they don't have a standardised colour scheme. So I think what we're after is an appropriate camouflage scheme submitted to us, and that could involve a variety of colours from the fencing, and it can range through a palette of colours. I think we don't like the white. But I would say there's a blend of colours going from light grey through the greens and the landscape colours that could camouflage this development more. And the other point I would make, because it's about visual impact, is when we're looking at the landscape, is that the best way to screen the development is to use the landform. So you talked about the spoil issue. The idea would be ideally to use landform to screen the development, and then natural vegetation if you can, tree planting. So all these aspects is I think it's a key consideration that we are concerned about the visual impact, particularly from the approach road to Clackmannanshire. And therefore, I think we're asking for an appropriate camouflage scheme is submitted to us, and that we don't define any colours at this precise stage, that we allow from some sort of iteration, because it will very much depend on the type of landscape that it's in and how we best hide that development. So it's a bit long-winded. It's more about, rather than us define a particular colour from a committee, let's say an appropriate camouflage scheme.
I take the point entirely, in fact, because if it were for some reason impossible to change the colour, and then a planted tree line or something might achieve the same objective, which is to diminish the visual impact when you're driving up A76 into the county. If you look over to the right, you have this horrible straight lines and square, everything's sort of very unnatural. Sitting in what we saw was quite a natural environment there. And that's the big change to that. So if those square lines, straight lines and square edges were able to be mitigated visually by tree planting as an alternative to colouring these things, not to a non-standard shade, which might be very, very expensive and meet with very strenuous objection. But I don't know, can we talk about tree coverage on the border of the 876? John, do you want to stick into that?
Really quick, John, there is a separate landscaping condition,
Yes.
Chair, again, condition 20 on page 47, that does cover the screening my landscape separate to the colour. So officers have picked up on that. I mean, I take very much the councillor's point about, yes, I mean, I think it is the desire of the committee that we want to clarify, we want it to look better than the landscape, so perhaps wording around that and leaving the colour maybe a bit more fluid. And then ultimately, the committee can only express a desire, can't actually dictate it. But I think if you feel strongly about it, I think you should do that. And I'm getting the impression that you do.
Yeah, Councillor Law.
So we could put an amendment in regards to what Lee had said, that in conjunction with the chair of the planning committee to come back to you. Obviously you've understood our expression and you've got the same expression, so that I would be happy if it went that way, that it went, if it was an amendment in regards that way. Does that make sense?
So just to clarify, we're wanting it to be a condition instead of an amendment. So the condition would be amendment.
Or a condition, yeah.
Amendment for a condition, right? Okay, just to clarify that. Right. But it's just to delegate the powers to the planning officer, is that correct?
Well, no, in conjunction with the chair, that the planning authority be through the chair.
Jacob.
Morning, Chair. So I was just going to suggest a condition that prior to development starting, that the colour of the units is submitted to and approved by the planning authority. And then in the reason for the condition, explain why we want that condition added, so the camouflaging and the colours. Explain that in the reasons for the condition, so it doesn't stop them from introducing another colour. It just means that we'll have sight of the development prior to that colour being introduced.
So are you going to suggest a form of wording we can take as an amendment to insert into one of these paragraphs?
Yes, so it would be along the lines of prior to the development starting, that the colour of the units is submitted to.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, prior to the development starting, that the colour of the units is submitted to and approved by the planning authority.
That in conjunction with the chair.
We are.
And the chief planner consultation.
And then in terms of the reasons, we'll take those from the committee. So I think Councillor Basili had reasons there about camouflaging the scheme. Councillor Law shown a preference for green. But I think we can develop those reasons offline.
We'll get the sentence read out, get general acceptance of it, and then we'll propose it and second it. You guys can do that.
Councillor, if it needs refining to make sure that's legally correct, are we able to do that outside this arena?
We've got two lawyers sitting with us.
I have a kind of point of order. If we are consultees, we don't actually set the conditions. It's the determining authority. Therefore, I don't know whether we can set conditions to give to the authority. We can outline our areas of concern. Would request that these be covered by conditions, but I don't know if we can wholesale go around, we want this condition. I mean, it's a request. I'm sorry about this, but if you want to lie, Lauren and myself, we didn't consult, but I've got about 6 other issues that I was wondering whether would have been governed by the authority that gives consent and whether there was sort of standard conditions to cover these sort of things. But certainly, my view, sorry to round this up, was very much that the committee, one of the main concerns is the landscape impact, the visual impact. And then we want an appropriate landscape plan, which I said earlier, I think ought to include raised landform as well as tree planting. And also that we camouflage the development our colour scheme. That's the kind of request, but I don't know whether we frame that as a condition. It's more a request to the authority that these aspects be covered.
Right, and I'm going to ask Councillor Hypen in a second, but I just want to clarify. And John, a statement has just been made that we can't impose conditions. Can you comment on that?
Well, Appendix 1 is a draft list of conditions which we propose if we agreed no objection to the scheme as an authority. These are really important to the Energy Consents Unit, and I've taken these largely from a scheme I dealt with in Dumfries and Galloway, which has been consented. It's the first scheme I've actually dealt with, which was consented, and of a comparable size and nature as this. So what I am advised by the Energy Consents Unit, unlike wind farms where they've developed a set of standard conditions, they haven't yet done that for BESS. So I'm working from the most recent consent that I've been able to get my hands on, which is a case that I dealt with. So, you know, largely, the Energy Consents Unit will take into full account the conditions that we recommend as a council. What they will often do is change them to fit their own wording and so on. But at the moment, they haven't developed for BESS the same sort of thing as they've developed for wind farms. Doesn't stop us recommending conditions. In fact, they like it because we will often cover issues that they may not have thought of. And unless they seem to be unreasonable or not fit for purpose, they will usually include them. For example, if you've got your roads specialist will set out a bunch of technical conditions, not in this case, obviously, because everything's coming in from Fife, then largely the Energy Consents Unit will reflect that in their decision if they ultimately ministers issue consent. So I think it is valid to sort of, you know, anything that we recommend with regard to conditions, they will take into account, and it is valid to do that, which is why we produced an appendix with a draft set in there.
John, thank you. That's very helpful clarification. Councillor McTaggart.
Was actually just about to make a point that John has just made. We've already got conditions in there. So clearly the planning officers have considered certain impacts that this development might cause for Clackmannanshire. So therefore, we're really only emphasising what our feeling is regarding the site and adding to those conditions. So I don't see how, if the planning authority can make conditions, I don't see why the planning committee can't make conditions.
Exactly so. John, you want to add a rider to that?
I just wanted to make a point that condition 5, which we've recommended, at the beginning of it is there shall be no commencement of development unless and until details of the storage technology and associated infrastructure, etc., are submitted to and approved. And that isn't specific with regard to the colour of the units, but it is a catch-all. So we have already developed a condition which is, at least to some extent, suitable, so we can review a firmed up scheme. What you have to understand about these applications is that quite often they are put together in a short amount of time, and the information you get with the applications is not comprehensive. Certainly in this case, we've had to ask for additional information during the consideration period because we haven't actually had quite enough to go on. And so there was a number of items submitted as additional information before we could finalise our report. And hence you've got things like this, which, especially with this sort of application, where they have intentionally not firmed up all the specific details. That's why you have this sort of condition. So we are covered to a certain extent. My thoughts were that if perhaps on reflection, if we are to accept the recommendation today, we can strongly convey the committee's wishes that they would like to be able to be involved in the consideration of the colour of the units and so on. That might be the simplest way without having to do an amendment, and it is fairly standard practice.
Okay, I'm not seeing the coverage in condition 5 about the visual aspects of it. Am I just missing that? It seems to be more about the access, water supply, emergency services, storage technology, infrastructure, final site layout. Well, that's a bit vague. Am I on the wrong page here?
So page 38's got condition 5, and
Yeah,
that's where it's required that details of the storage technology, which is all the components within that. The storage technology includes the BESS units. So that captures the individual components, which we could consider at a later date, because these details are not approvable at this stage because they're not firm. But then condition 20 is specific to the landscaping.
30, did you say? What? Am I looking at the wrong one?
38.
38.
So page 38, condition 5, that's the earlier one, which is the catch-all for the, and then if you go to condition, proposed or draft condition 20, which is on page 47, that's purely about the landscaping. So that really is about how you can implement landscaping to help offset the visual impacts. So you've got two separate things. But landscaping has been picked out specifically because of our quite significant concern that the landscaping is inadequate at present to offset visual impacts from the A876.
Yeah, okay, I accept that. Right. Lee?
So I just want to check, John, because what we've got in condition 5, and I hear what you're saying in terms of that catch-all clause, but actually it says, if you go further down into it, it says that including final details of access of water supply for emergency service have been submitted to and approved in writing by Scottish ministers. That's not this council, which is, I think, what the proposed amendment is looking to achieve. So we're the discretion in terms of that actual colour we're leaving with Scottish ministers. Now, if that is correct and linking back to what Councillor Balsillie has been saying, that these are mere recommendations by this local authority, then I'm not sure how we can then slot in a condition around that Jacob has suggested that says prior to commencement of the development of prior to commencement of the development, and this is what I've written down as an amendment, by the way. So prior to the commencement of the development, the colour of the units is submitted to the planning authority and in consultation with the chair, agreed. It's just a rough one just now, but if that's not possible and we have to go back to what is the discretion of the actual Scottish ministers, that's the clarity I need.
Thank you. I think the way I feel about this is belt and braces. You do have condition 5. That gives us some ability now I'm not entirely sure whether Scottish ministers would involve us in that condition. I have to say, so that is something we would have to check. But if you want belt and braces and you want us to be involved, adding a condition, if that is if the committee is minded to go with that, which similarly to condition 20, which deals with landscaping, enables us to consider the colour of some of the components of the development at a later date. My view is that it is valid to also include that in our recommendation back in our consultation response.
I think on that basis, my advice to the committee would be to add the condition that Jacob has suggested, because the condition 5.1 is very much linked to submitting an approval in writing to Scottish ministers, whereas actually Jacob's is more linked to the proposal of the agreement of the local authority as a planning authority. Sorry, Jacob, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think we just maybe need to refine the wording. So, prior to development, the colour of the best units shall be submitted to and approved by the planning authority and be returned as approved thereafter. My colleague here mentioned that they might change the colour straight after, so we need to watch out for that. So, prior to development, the colour of the best units that shall be submitted to and approved by the planning authority and be returned as approved thereafter.
Please do, yeah.
Right, I'm hoping I've got this right, okay? Jacob talks very fast.
And that will say, do we agree to add anything in about landscaping? And to soften.
So I think my understanding is that this proposal is very linked to the
Right.
colour of the units, and then the landscaping provisions, as John has said, is sitting at
Condition 20.
20 at 47. So if we do this one, and if we feel that we need to make an amendment to the landscaping one, we can move on to that
Right,
one.
okay,
Is that okay? So the proposed amendment to the report is that prior to the commencement of the development, and I can't remember what you said, colour, I've got colour of the units,
Best units.
the best units, is submitted to the planning authority in consultation with the chair and being retained as agreed and retained. Oh, sorry, I've got this wrong. Give me two texts. I'm passing you over to my colleague. She's got it written all down.
So what I've got here is prior to development starting, that the colour of the best units is submitted to and approved by the planning authority and retained as approved thereafter in conjunction with the chair of the planning committee. Is that correct, Jacob?
No, we find it, so the bit after there and the team thereafter. That's just then it's full stop.
Thereafter. So we're taking it apart in conjunction with the chair.
Because we decided that planning authority doesn't have to change.
Yeah.
Right, that's fine. Okay, so we just, do you want me to read it in its entirety again? Are we okay?
I don't know if you want to adjourn for 5 minutes because there might be another suggested condition coming forward as well. So, from what I gather, not from us, just the committee members were talking about the landscaping. So maybe if we listen to what's happening and then adjourn for 5 minutes to get that written up.
So who's writing this up? You and another legal team. Okay, folks, we'll adjourn until 20.
I think it would be easier if we were going to do this is basically deal with all the questions and just in case anything, so.
I would propose that we deal with all the questions first, just in case there is anything further that requires to be amended rather than adjourning, go back and adjourning. So if we can continue with questions and then we can adjourn.
That
and
makes sense.
prepare the amendments and then put it forward.
Right,
Thank you.
okay. Let's park the appearance and for the moment. Any further questions? Councillor Balsillie.
Thank you. So, this is new technology, and all of us are dealing with just as the authority determines these issues. So we've had a good debate. My question is whether the authority can address the following issues, and the implication is, if I'm not, we should maybe request that the following aspects are covered by the determining authority. So we've had a discussion on camouflage, and I prefer to use that phrase rather than colour. Camouflage in the landscape is mitigated. So does the authority have any standard conditions in that? It doesn't, from what was said. So is there a standard condition on site fire electrical protection? So
not that I know of, not a standard, but again, I would suggest that, now I'm not sure what the regimes are, but there are separate regimes for fire regulations. You know, the operators will have to have a fire and evacuation strategy, but that, to my mind, doesn't necessarily come into our considerations, the planning authority.
So yeah, basically your response is it's covered by other legislation in your view. It's just obviously Union Street, people's minds at the forefront, lithium and water don't mix. So for an electric fire, you need proper foam and things like that. But you're saying it's covered by other legislation. That's fine. That was just one of the things. Should there be a safety zone? Is there a safety zone around these developments?
My answer to that is I don't know that if that's not something which has come into sort of dialogue or conversation. I think perhaps what we could do, if we are going to at some stage adjourn on this one for a minute, is I'd like to be able to just look at the information on the ECU website, if we can't do that while we're active, just to pick up on because there is something on there with regard to fire and emergency. But again, it's not really fully within our remit, so it hasn't come through in the report, but we could just have a look for clarity and for sort of giving us some comfort that it is there.
My fourth question is, the site's going to be restored in 40 years. Is there a
John, can you bring your mic up?
Is a restoration bond proposed for the site like mineral developments?
Yeah, it is. I'm just looking for the condition. It might be 10. Look. Yeah, condition 10, financial guarantee. That's for a bond or other form of financial guarantee to do with the cost of performance of all decommissioning, restoration, and aftercare obligations. And that is, again, taken from the consent I mentioned, which are dealt with the bumpers and Dalloway. So we do have that in place.
That's brilliant, thank you. And community benefit, is there any community benefit clauses? Just like wind farms, could we get some community benefit requests from this development?
It's not a planning matter. We can't discuss that. The committee community benefits are entirely separate from planning, and we're not entitled to. It's not a material planning consideration, so we're not really at liberty to discuss that.
A little bit surprised with that response, but there's no wind farms we can ask for mitigation measures and community benefits from development, but I'll accept you're the professional officer. Finally, our own percentage for art policy, could we apply that to this development?
No, that's not something that we can do because we're not the determining authority. And in my experience, it's not something that the Energy Consent Unit and Scottish ministers will entertain. But if anybody else wants to add to that, I'm more than happy.
So just a reminder, this is not a planning application that is sitting before the planning committee. This is section 36. So it's been determined by the Scottish ministers rather than this council. So community benefits are that type of thing, don't fall within material condition in terms of consideration for the actual planning authority.
Thank you.
Yeah, those are key issues that I thought we could not necessarily covered by condition, but request of the authority, and that's, we covered those, thank you.
Thank you, Donald. Any further questions? No, right, so before we move on, do you want to have that break then to do the drafting? How many folk do you want to call?
Yeah, Chair, I think I would like to have a bit of breathing space to make that, refine that condition, because so far we haven't quite got there. And also I would like to have a chance to have a look at the ECU website to just pick up on the fire information that's on there.
Well,
So I just want to come in for 1 second because before we break, we were in discussions about the landscaping, and I know that Councillor Basili was making reference to the proposed amendment with a particular focus around camouflage, but are we satisfied that actually the condition 20 in terms of the landscaping, which would deal with that kind of camouflage aspect of it, Councillor Basili, if that would be enough under that condition 20? Because if all we're going away to do is to basically try and pull together the amendment in relation to adding to 5.3, my understanding is that the preference of the committee is around colour rather than the camouflage, but I just want to get clarity on that before I draft something up.
To me, it's just a subtlety. Camouflage suggests a blend of colours and the various components good. So I don't think they'll change the pylon colour, nor should we, because that's nationally recognised. So the pylons, of which there's a large number in the vicinity, will probably stay grey against the skyline. However, I think we're talking that rather than fixing a colour green or white, I think it's a blend of colours, and that's why I used the camouflage for the various infrastructure elements. And I think that could quite legitimately be submitted to reduce the impact of the development on the landscape. So I think they're asking for colours, not rather than colour or colours to camouflage the development. It's probably the purpose.
okay, Bart.
Thanks, Chair. I think the point there is a very detailed condition 20 on the landscape, and I think it's quite important just to know that members are comfortable that that covers all your concerns with regarding the screening of the site in terms of landscaping. And I think probably do need to adjourn to get the wording of any new condition right. A bit more time to maybe think about it, and also so John can investigate the safety aspects for you. But I wonder if maybe the new condition specifically talking about the colour, and I think you're right up to a point, Councillor Bristol, we can't definitely say we want this colour because it's not in our gift. However, the committee can say it has a preference for the colour, but it wants the colour to be explored and then that final decision to be delegated to Chief Planning Officer and consultant with the chair. So I wondered if it might be better, and I think we should adjourn, to keep condition 20 as is, the landscaping condition, because I think it is very comprehensive unless members tell me they don't think it is. And then maybe put a new condition 21 alongside that on the colour. And then the archaeology becomes 22 and the biodiversity comes 23. So we put in an additional, because I think the colour and the landscaping, they all cover the visual impacts of the scheme on Clant Manager. So I think they sit alongside each other, but we just maybe need a little bit of time to get the wording of the screening, the visual impact, colour, whatever that may be, refined so that everybody's happy with the wording. Is that right? And members happy with that?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Councillor McTaggart, then Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Chair. I would just maybe to strengthen that condition 20 a bit, especially visual impact with the 876, because that seems to be, we spoke about 45 seconds and 30 seconds. I'm not thinking so much about the 45 seconds and 30 seconds. I'm thinking about, let's say visitors come into the county, and that's the first thing they see as they enter the county on the 876. So if that was my first, the first thing I saw coming into the county, I don't think I'd be very happy if you were going into a strange place and just seeing that. But if that was softened in some way, as Chair pointed out earlier, if it wasn't these square box shapes, if it was softened by some visually pleasing articles, taking away the colour of the units for the moment, but just something that softens and blends into the landscape rather than sticks out like a sore thumb.
Thank you.
Chair, can I come back on that, please, Chair? Just on that individual point, rather than skipping on.
Yeah.
Fine. That is the intention of the condition. And I mentioned about seeing landscaping, which has been put in with regard to other infrastructure schemes where even at the point of implementation, you can see that it's going to take effect. Now, it's not immediate. It's going to take a few years to mature. But I think that is what we are looking for through that condition. We agree with that, and that's why we've specifically, if you look at the reason for the condition on page 48, I've gone into some detail there about specifically why we're asking for this, and it is really important. I agree, and one of my first thoughts was what we're going to see when we're passing on the AA76. Hence that condition and hence the dialogue we've had with the applicants. And we've also been out on a joint visit ourselves, Pauline and Jacob and I, to look specifically at this, to see whether we were comfortable with that aspect of it. We do feel that the application doesn't go far enough in terms of, that there really isn't any screen planting at the moment on that side of things. And it's really important that we get something there. And they're going to, if this condition is accepted in the event of this being consented, it's a really important component for us, and we will be able to look at this. We will be responsible for assessing whether what they put in the future is sufficient to discharge that condition.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this the landscaping scheme basically is the only thing at the moment that we should be really deciding on, because the visual impacts on that, you were talking about cars going up that road. It's not just a 30-second thing, because you could have 45 other cars all coming up behind you with the same problem, with the same issue of seeing these things. When I'm looking at this, page 20 and up to 48, where you've got the biodiversity as well as archaeological works being watched over as well, it seems to be quite a strong indication of the right way of actually doing that. But obviously we have to look further into it. But I'm quite content with that. I mean, I'm reading what's said there, and to me, it's giving every part of that an issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I think it's important we get the wording of this right, because the more stringent we make our conditions, the more likely they are to be refused. It becomes difficult if we want pieces on a chessboard, so we want our approach to be sort of multi-pointed, so that we can win some and lose some, perhaps. So maybe not lumping too much into a single condition. If we give ourselves bargaining points, trading points. So anyway, let's do as we suggested. Let's break now until, we'll say 10 minutes, but if you're done early, come back early and we'll reconvene.
Chair, could I beg your indulgence very quickly? We'll come back on this community benefit sort of question, which I'm not challenged with.
Donald.
So we've said this is one of the key access points into Clackmannanshire, and that we would want the development to be mitigated visually. But one of the other ways to maybe visually mitigate is to provide a distraction, like a welcome to Clackmannanshire sign, an improved welcome to Clackmannanshire sign. Is that not something we could ask or request in the development, which is a community benefit, but is directly related to the development?
Well, I think we're governed in all that we do by the regulations that control planning applications. So this is it's a planning application. It's not a council motion for development, etc. We'll take advice on that. Lee, do you want to?
I mean, I'm happy to provide you with the relevant legislation that says it's non-material consideration. We did have training session when we dealt with the Section 36 notice for the wind farm that we were dealing with, and I think we had Adishal Goddard in, explained the reasoning why community benefits don't take into account when you're dealing with an application that's ultimately being determined by the Scottish ministers. But I can provide that guidance for you again and read that back after I come back from the drafting this up.
I do understand the separation. It's just whether that might be another appropriate planning condition that in terms of the visual mitigation and improved welcome to Clackmannanshire sign is provided as a distraction.
Another side of the road.
Thank you. Okay, we are now suspended for 10 minutes.